The broken wheelchair scraped against the church steps as Emma Sullivan struggled to navigate the entrance alone. Behind her, she could hear the familiar chorus of whispers that had followed her since the accident 2 years ago. Such a shame, they said. Poor thing can't even take care of herself. But it was her own sister's voice that cut deepest. I can't keep doing this. Emma, you're too much. Emma's hands trembled as she gripped the worn rubber handles of her chair. The small Montana town of Cedar Ridge had made its verdict clear. She was damaged goods, a burden that even her own family couldn't bear to carry. The job rejections had piled up like autumn leaves, each one another nail in the coffin of her independence. We're looking for someone more capable, they'd say, their eyes avoiding hers. As the church service began, Emma sat in the back row, invisible among the wooden pews. She'd once been the town's star teacher, the woman who could wrangle 30 kindergartners with nothing but a smile and endless patience. Now, she was the cautionary tale mothers whispered to their daughters. See what happens when you're not careful on those mountain roads. The sermon droned on about God's plan, about how every person had a purpose. Emma's jaw clenched. If this was God's plan, she wanted a refund. Her savings account was nearly empty. Her sister had given her 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live, and the employment office had stopped returning her calls. After the service, she wheeled herself toward the exit, keeping her head down. But as she reached the door, a shadow fell across her path. She looked up to see Jake Morrison, the widowed rancher who owned the largest spread in the county. His weathered hands held his hat, and his gray eyes studied her with an intensity that made her squirm. Emma Sullivan, he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd spent decades commanding respect from both horses and men. I've been looking for you. She blinked, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry. My housekeeper just quit. Ran off with that traveling salesman from Billings. His mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. I need someone to manage the house, handle the books, maybe help with correspondence. It's a live-in position. Room, board, and a fair wage. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. Mr. Morrison, I don't think you understand. I can't. Can't what? Can't keep books. Can't organize a household. Can't tell a grown man when he's tracking mud through a clean kitchen. His eyebrows rose. Because from what I remember, you ran that classroom like a wheel-oiled machine for 8 years. I figure a house can't be much different. The whispers around them grew louder, but for the first time in 2 years, Emma didn't care. Jake Morrison wasn't looking at her wheelchair. He was looking at her. Think about it, he said, settling his hat back on his head. But don't think too long. I need an answer by tomorrow. Emma spent the night staring at the ceiling of her sister's guest room, Jake Morrison's words echoing in her mind. By dawn, she'd made her decision. She wheeled herself to the kitchen where her sister Sarah was already preparing breakfast. Her movements sharp and efficient. I'm leaving, Emma announced, without preamble. Sarah's coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. What do you mean, leaving? Jake Morrison offered me a job as his housekeeper. Emma's voice was steadier than she felt. I'm taking it. Emma, be reasonable. Sarah set down her mug with a sharp clink. You can't possibly manage a ranch house. The man lives 20 miles outside town, and his place is huge. How would you even? The same way I managed my classroom for 8 years, Emma interrupted. The same way I managed my own apartment before the accident. The same way I'm managing right now, despite everyone telling me I can't. Sarah's face flushed. I never said you couldn't do anything. I just said you said I was too much. The words hung in the air between them like a blade. You said you couldn't keep doing this. Well, now you won't have to. An hour later, Emma sat in the passenger seat of Jake's pickup truck, watching the familiar streets of Cedar Ridge disappear behind them. Her few possessions were loaded in the bed, and her wheelchair was secured in the back. Jake drove in comfortable silence, occasionally pointing out landmarks or commenting on the weather. You sure about this? He asked, as they turned onto a dirt road that stretched endlessly toward the mountains. Are you? She countered. He smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Lady, I've been sure about a lot of things in my life. Some worked out, some didn't. But I've learned to trust my gut. And my gut says you're exactly what this place needs. The Morrison Ranch sprawled across the valley like something from a postcard. The main house was a 2-story log structure with a wraparound porch, flanked by barns and outbuildings. Horses grazed in nearby pastures, and the whole scene was framed by snow-capped peaks that touched the sky. It's beautiful, Emma breathed. It's home, Jake said simply. Has been for 3 generations of Morrisons. My grandfather built the original cabin. My father expanded it. And my wife. He trailed off, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. Emma had heard the stories. Margaret Morrison had died in a car accident 5 years ago, leaving Jake to run the ranch alone. He'd become something of a hermit since then, rarely venturing into town, except for necessities. She had plans for renovations, he continued. Wanted to modernize the kitchen, add a bathroom downstairs. I never saw the point, but now ... double quotes. He glanced at her wheelchair. Now I'm thinking maybe she was onto something. As they pulled up to the house, Emma felt a flutter of nerves. The front steps were steep, and she could already see the challenges ahead. But Jake was already out of the truck, unloading her wheelchair with practiced efficiency. There's a ramp around back, he said, anticipating her concern. Built it last winter when my knee was acting up. Figured it might come in handy someday. The back entrance led directly into the kitchen, a spacious room with soaring ceilings and windows that framed the mountain view. It was beautiful, but Emma's trained eye immediately catalogued the disaster. Dishes piled in the sink, papers scattered across the counter, and what looked like a week's worth of mail stacked precariously on the table. I warned you, it was bad, Jake said, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. Emma rolled forward, surveying the chaos with growing excitement. For the first time in 2 years, she saw possibility instead of limitation. Mr. Morrison, she said, turning to face him, I think this is going to work out just fine. Within a week, Emma had transformed the Morrison ranch house from a bachelor's disaster into a functional home. She'd reorganized the kitchen, established a system for the mail, and even convinced Jake to install a few grab bars in the downstairs bathroom. The changes were practical, efficient, and exactly what the house needed. What she hadn't expected was how much she needed the house in return. You're different, Jake observed one morning, watching her navigate the kitchen with practiced ease as she prepared breakfast. Lighter somehow. Emma paused in her whisking of eggs. I have a purpose here. I'd forgotten what that felt like. The ranch operated on a rhythm as old as the land itself. Sunrise brought the feeding of cattle, midday the maintenance of fences and equipment, and sunset the careful counting of heads to ensure no animals had wandered. Emma found herself drawn into this rhythm, her wheelchair becoming as natural a part of the landscape as the weathered fence posts. She took over the ranch's bookkeeping, discovering a mind for numbers she'd never fully utilized. The accounts were a mess, but she could see the ranch's potential buried beneath layers of disorganization. Jake was a gifted rancher, but a terrible businessman, and Emma's arrival had freed him to focus on what he did best. The feed costs are eating into profits, she told him one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. But if we switch suppliers and buy in bulk, we could save nearly 30%. Jake nodded, his attention seemingly focused on the horizon. You ever think about what you want to do with your life? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? I mean, you could do anything. Run a business, teach again, write a book. You've got the brains for it. The spirit too, once you let it show. Emma's throat tightened. I don't think the world is ready for a teacher in a wheelchair. The world's ready for someone who knows how to get things done, Jake said firmly. The wheelchair's just how you get around. Like me using a truck instead of a horse. Their conversations had become the highlight of Emma's days. Jake was surprisingly well read for a rancher, and he listened to her ideas with the same attention. He paid to his cattle. He never patronized her, never spoke slowly or moved objects out of her way without asking. He simply treated her as he would any competent adult. The town's reaction to her employment was predictably mixed. Some folks nodded approvingly when they saw her in the feed store or the bank, handling ranch business with quiet efficiency. Others whispered about Jake Morrison's charity case and wondered how long it would last. They're talking, Jake mentioned one day after a trip to town for supplies. Let them talk, Emma replied, not looking up from the invoices she was reviewing. I've got work to do. But the whispers followed her into her dreams. She'd made a place for herself at the ranch, but it was built on Jake's kindness, not her own merit. What happened when he grew tired of accommodating her? What happened when he realized she really was more trouble than she was worth? The doubt crept in during the quiet moments, when she was alone with her thoughts and the vastness of the Montana landscape. She'd created a life here, but was it really hers? Or was she just another broken thing Jake Morrison had decided to fix? One evening, as she struggled to reach a high shelf in the pantry, Jake appeared behind her. Instead of reaching for the item himself, he simply asked, "What do you need?" "The rice," she said, pointing upward. He handed it to her, then stepped back. You know, we could install a pulley system, make everything accessible. Emma stared at the bag in her hands. Why would you do that? Because this is your home too, he said simply. And homes should work for the people who live in them. The first snow of the season arrived in November, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Emma woke to find Jake already gone, tending to the cattle that needed extra feed in the cold. She made her way to the kitchen, where she found a note scrawled in his familiar handwriting. Storm coming, stay inside, back by noon. But noon came and went with no sign of Jake. Emma tried his cell phone, but the call went straight to voicemail. By 3 o'clock, she was pacing the kitchen, her anxiety growing with each passing minute. The storm hit at 4, transforming the gentle snowfall into a howling blizzard. Emma positioned herself at the window, straining to see through the white curtain that had descended over the ranch. The temperature was dropping fast, and she knew cattle could die in weather like this. At 5:30, she heard the growl of an engine. Jake's truck materialized from the storm, moving slowly through the deep snow. Emma met him at the back door, relief flooding through her as he stamped the snow from his boots. I was worried, she said, then immediately felt foolish. Jake Morrison had been surviving Montana winters long before she arrived. Lost a calf, he said grimly, hanging up his coat. Mama rejected it after birth. Had to bring it to the barn, get it warmed up. He paused, studying her face. You were really worried. Of course I was worried. What if something had happened to you? Then I guess you'd have inherited a ranch, he said with a weak smile. Emma's heart clenched. Don't joke about that. I'm not joking. Jake's voice was serious now. Emma, I need to tell you something. I've been putting it off, but with weather like this. He moved to the kitchen table, pulling out a chair. Emma wheeled herself closer, her pulse quickening at his grave expression. I'm not a young man, he began. And this ranch, it's everything to me. But when I'm gone, it'll go to my nephew in California. He's a good kid, but he's got no interest in ranching. He'll sell it to developers within a year. Emma's chest tightened. Jake, what are you saying? I'm saying I've been thinking about making some changes. To my will, to the ranch structure. I want to create a trust, something that would preserve this place. And I want you to be part of it. Me, Emma's voice came out as a whisper. You understand this place, you love it, and you've got the skills to make it profitable again. Jake reached across the table, his weathered hand covering hers. I know what people say about you, about us, but I need you to know something. Having you here, it's been the best thing that's happened to me in years. Emma stared at their joined hands, her mind reeling. I can't let you do that. People will say you're just being charitable, that I'm taking advantage. Let them say what they want. Jake interrupted. I know what I see. I see a woman who took a broken-down ranch house and made it a home. I see someone who looks at my ledger books and sees possibilities instead of problems. I see strength, Emma, real strength. Tears she'd been holding back for months finally spilled over. I was so scared, she whispered. Scared that you'd realize I'm not worth the trouble, not worth it. Jake's voice was rough with emotion. Emma, you're the most capable person I've ever met. The fact that you use a wheelchair doesn't change that. If anything, it proves just how strong you really are. The storm raged outside, but inside the warm kitchen, Emma felt something shift. The walls she'd built around her heart, the barriers she'd erected against hope and possibility, began to crumble. For the first time since the accident, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved good things. I need to check on that calf, Jake said, standing. You want to come with me? Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, I'd like that. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it new life and new challenges. Emma had settled into her role as ranch manager, and her suggestions were transforming the operation's profitability. But with success came attention, and attention brought complications. You've got a visitor, Jake announced one morning. His tone carefully neutral. Emma looked up from the computer, where she'd been updating the ranch's website. Through the window, she could see a familiar silver sedan parked in the driveway. Her sister Sarah stood beside it, looking uncomfortable in her city clothes. I'll handle this, Emma said, saving her work. Want me to stay? No, this is something I need to do alone. Sarah was examining the garden Emma had planted near the house when she rolled onto the porch. It's beautiful here, Sarah said without turning around. I never really understood the appeal of ranch life, but I can see why you like it. What do you want, Sarah? Her sister turned, and Emma was surprised to see tears in her eyes. I want to apologize. I've been thinking about what I said. About calling you. What I called you, it was wrong. You were never a burden, Emma. I was just scared. Scared of what? Of not being enough. Of not being able to help you the way you needed. Of watching you struggle and not knowing how to fix it. Sarah's voice broke. I handled it all wrong. I pushed you away when I should have been pulling you closer. Emma felt her anger wavering. I needed support, not to be treated like a problem to be solved. I know that now. Watching you here, seeing what you've accomplished, I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see what everyone else can see. What do you mean? Sarah smiled through her tears. I mean the way Jake Morrison looks at you. The way this whole place has come alive since you arrived. You didn't just find a job, Emma. You found a home. That afternoon, Emma and Sarah walked through the ranch grounds together. Sarah asked thoughtful questions about the operation, genuinely interested in Emma's work. When Jake returned from checking the fences, he found them sitting on the porch, talking like the sisters they'd once been. Stay for dinner, Emma offered. I'd like that, Sarah replied. Over dinner, Emma watched Jake interact with her sister. He was polite but reserved, and she could see the protective instinct in his eyes. He'd become her champion, her defender against a world that had written her off. But something deeper had been growing between them, something neither of them had acknowledged. After Sarah left, promising to visit again soon, Emma and Jake sat in their usual spots on the porch. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. She seems nice, Jake said finally. She's trying. That's more than I expected. People can change. Sometimes they just need time to figure things out. Emma turned to look at him. Is that what happened with us? Time to figure things out. Jake's eyes met hers, and she saw her own feelings reflected there. Emma, don't, she whispered. Don't say it if you don't mean it. I mean it, he said firmly. I've meant it for months, but I didn't want you to feel obligated, didn't want you to think it was part of the job. And I didn't want you to think I was taking advantage of your kindness. Jake stood, moving to kneel beside her chair. Look at me, Emma. She did, seeing the man who'd given her back her purpose, her dignity, her hope. I'm not offering you charity, he said. I'm offering you my heart, if you want it. Emma's hands trembled as she reached for his face, tracing the lines that spoke of hard work and honest living. I want it, she whispered. I want all of it. When he kissed her, it was gentle and reverent, a promise of something beautiful, built on mutual respect and genuine love. Emma had thought her fairy tale ended on a dark mountain road 2 years ago. She'd been wrong. It was just beginning. The engagement announcement in the Cedar Ridge Gazette caused quite a stir. Emma had expected the gossip, but she hadn't anticipated the overwhelming support from unexpected quarters. Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store stopped by with a casserole and her grandmother's wedding ring polish. The veterinarian's wife brought fabric samples for curtains, insisting that a ranch house needed a woman's touch. Seems like half the county wants to help plan this wedding, Jake observed, watching Emma sort through the growing pile of offered assistance. They're not helping plan our wedding, Emma corrected, smiling. They're celebrating that someone finally landed the eligible bachelor of Cedar Ridge. Is that what I am? According to the ladies at the church auxiliary, you've been the county's most sought-after widower for 3 years running, Jake groaned. No wonder I stopped going to church socials. Their wedding was set for early June, a small ceremony in the ranch's meadow with the mountains as their backdrop. Emma had dreamed of a big wedding once, but this felt right intimate, personal, surrounded by the land that had brought them together. The guest list was carefully curated. Sarah would stand as maid of honor, having earned her place through months of rebuilding their relationship. Jake's best man would be his longtime friend and neighboring rancher, Tom Bradley. The ceremony would be simple. The reception, a barbecue under the stars. I want to make some changes to the house, Jake said one evening, as they reviewed the contractor's estimates. A master suite on the main floor, a bigger bathroom, maybe expand the kitchen. Jake, you don't need to. I want to, he interrupted. Not because I have to, but because I want our home to be perfect for both of us. Besides, you've been making suggestions for months. Time to implement them. Emma studied the proposed floor plan, her heart swelling with possibilities. This is beautiful, but it's going to be expensive. The ranch is doing better than it has in years. Thanks to you, we can afford it. Thanks to us, Emma corrected. I manage the books, but you're the one who makes this place run. Jake pulled her into his arms, chair and all. We make a good team. The best, she agreed. The renovation began in earnest. With Emma coordinating contractors and timelines, while Jake handled the day-to-day ranch operations. The house filled with the sounds of construction hammering, sawing, the occasional, colorful language from the plumbers. Emma found herself energized by the controlled chaos, her project management skills fully engaged. "You're enjoying this," Jake observed, watching her direct the installation of the new bathroom fixtures. "I love seeing potential become reality," Emma admitted. "I think I missed my calling as a general contractor." "You could still do that, you know. After we're married, if you want to start a business." Emma paused, considering. "You'd be okay with that." "I'd be proud of that. This ranch will always be here, but you've got talents that could touch a lot of lives. Why not use them?" The idea took root in Emma's mind. She'd always been good at organizing, at seeing solutions where others saw problems. Maybe there was a way to combine her skills with her passion for helping others. That night, she sat at her computer researching accessibility consulting. The field was growing as more people recognized the need for inclusive design. Emma had lived the challenges firsthand. She understood what worked and what didn't, in ways that able-bodied consultants couldn't. "Find something interesting?" Jake asked, reading over her shoulder. "Maybe. There's a real need for accessibility consultants in this region. People who understand how to make spaces work for everyone. Sounds like you're the perfect person for the job." Emma leaned back against his chest, feeling his arms wrap around her. "I never thought I'd say this, but I think the accident might have been the best thing that ever happened to me." "How so?" "It brought me here. To you. To this life." She turned in his arms. "I spent so much time angry about what I'd lost. I couldn't see what I was gaining." Jake kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Emma Sullivan. Soon to be Emma Morrison." "I love you too, Jake Morrison. Thank you for seeing me, when everyone else just saw the wheelchair." "All I've ever seen is you," he said simply. "The woman who turned my house into a home, my chaos into order, my loneliness into love." June arrived with perfect weather, as if the Montana sky had decided to cooperate with their plans. Emma woke in her childhood bedroom at Sarah's house, where she'd spent the night, according to tradition. Through the window, she could see the distant mountains that surrounded the ranch, her ranch. Now, as much as it was Jake's. "Nervous?" Sarah asked, bringing her a cup of coffee. "Excited," Emma corrected. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Sarah had transformed over the past few months, becoming the sister Emma remembered from their childhood. She'd even started dating again, inspired by Emma's example. "You know, I used to think you were crazy for moving out to that ranch. Now, I think you're the sanest person I know." "What changed your mind?" "Seeing you with Jake. Seeing how happy you are. You're not just surviving anymore, Emma, you're thriving." The bridal preparations were a symphony of controlled chaos. Emma's dress was a simple but elegant design that accommodated her chair while still making her feel beautiful. She'd chosen flowers from the ranch's garden, wildflowers that spoke of the untamed beauty of their land. By afternoon, the ranch was transformed. White chairs arranged in neat rows faced a simple arch decorated with local flowers. The reception area was set up in the barn, which had been cleaned and decorated with string lights and mason jars filled with more wildflowers. "You look beautiful," Jake said when he saw her, his voice rough with emotion. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Emma replied, admiring him in his dark suit. The ceremony was everything Emma had dreamed of. Pastor Williams spoke about partnership and mutual support, about love that sees beyond circumstances, to the heart of a person. When Jake slipped the ring on her finger, Emma felt the final piece of her new life click into place. "I promise to love you, not despite your challenges, but because of your strength," Jake said during his vows. "I promise to see you, not your wheelchair. I promise to be your partner in everything, from ranch work to life's adventures." Emma's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to be your partner in all things, to bring order to your chaos and joy to your quiet moments. I promise to love this land as you do, to help it flourish as you've helped me flourish." When they kissed as husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause. Emma had never felt more complete, more herself, than in that moment. The reception was a celebration of community. As much as marriage, ranchers and townspeople mingled, sharing stories and laughter. Emma found herself surrounded by people who had known her before the accident, who remembered her as the capable teacher she'd been, and who now saw her as the strong woman she'd become. "Speech," someone called out, and the crowd took up the chant. Jake stood, pulling Emma's chair close to his side. "Most of you know I'm not much for speeches," he began, drawing laughter, "but I want to say something about my wife." Emma's heart swelled at the word. 2 years ago, Emma thought her life was over. Other people agreed with her. But I saw something different. I saw a woman who could organize chaos, who could find solutions where others saw only problems. I saw strength that had nothing to do with walking and everything to do with spirit. He looked down at Emma, his eyes bright with tears. Emma, you didn't just become my wife today. You became my inspiration. You showed me that the best things in life come to those who refuse to give up, who keep pushing forward even when the road gets rough. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. So here's to Emma Morrison, Jake continued, raising his glass. The woman who turned my house into a home, my ranch into a dream, and my life into an adventure. They called her a burden, but she's been my greatest blessing. The toast echoed across the ranch, carried by voices that had once whispered in pity but now spoke in admiration. Emma had found her place, her purpose, her love. The broken road had led her home at last, 6 months after the wedding. Emma Morrison's accessibility consulting business was thriving. What had started as a simple idea had grown into something much larger, a company that helped businesses and individuals create inclusive spaces throughout the region. You've got 3 new clients this week, Jake announced, sorting through the morning mail, including that new hotel in Billings. Emma looked up from her computer where she was designing a playground that would accommodate children with various abilities. The hotel project is exciting. It could really set a standard for the whole hospitality industry. My wife, the business mogul, Jake said with pride. Your wife, the woman who's finally found her calling, Emma corrected. The ranch had become the perfect base for her operations. The renovated house included a spacious office with state-of-the-art communication equipment, allowing her to work with clients across the region. When necessary, she traveled to project sites, her modified vehicle making her independent in ways she'd never imagined possible. I have news, she announced that evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. Good news or bad news? Depends on your perspective. The State Disability Council wants me to speak at their annual conference. They're offering me a position as a regional advocate. Jake's eyebrows rose. That's huge, Emma. Are you interested? I think so. It would mean travel, public speaking, working with legislators. It's a chance to make a real difference on a larger scale. Then you should do it. Emma studied his face, looking for any sign of reluctance. It would mean more time away from the ranch. From you. It would mean you're changing the world, Jake said firmly. This ranch will always be here. But opportunities like this don't come along every day. What about us? What about the ranch? Jake pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. We're strong enough to handle anything. Besides, I've been thinking about expanding the operation. Maybe bringing in some help, someone who can handle things when we're both busy. You think I'm going to let you travel around the state without me? I've got vacation time accumulated, and I'd like to see more of Montana than just this valley. Emma felt her heart swell with love for this man, who supported her dreams without hesitation. You'd really do that? Emma, I'd follow you anywhere, but I have a feeling we're going to be too busy here to do much traveling. What do you mean? Jake's eyes twinkled with mischief. I mean, I got a call from the adoption agency today. They have a little girl who needs a home, a 3-year-old who uses a wheelchair, just like her potential new mom. Emma's breath caught. They'd discussed adoption, but hadn't taken any concrete steps. Jake, are you serious? Dead serious. Her name is Lily, and she's been in foster care since she was born. The social worker says she's been waiting for the right family, one that would understand her needs. Tears streamed down Emma's face. When can we meet her? Next week, if you're ready. Emma thought about everything that had brought her to this moment: the accident, the rejection, the despair, and finally, the hope that had grown into love. She thought about the little girl who's waiting for a family that would see her potential instead of her limitations. I'm ready, she whispered. I've been ready my whole life. That night, Emma stood in the nursery they'd prepared, running her hands over the crib rail. The room was designed with accessibility in mind. Low shelves and open spaces that would allow both mother and daughter to navigate together. Everything was perfect, waiting for the little girl who would complete their family. Scared? Jake asked from the doorway. Terrified, Emma admitted. But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means something wonderful is about to happen. Jake joined her in the middle of the room, taking her hands in his. You're going to be an amazing mother. We're going to be amazing parents, Emma corrected. This little girl is going to have everything she needs to thrive, including a mother who understands what it's like to be underestimated. Jake added. Emma nodded, her vision blurring with happy tears, including that. The first time Emma saw Lily, she was sitting in her tiny wheelchair in the foster home's living room, playing with blocks. The little girl had dark curls and the most serious brown eyes Emma had ever seen. When she looked up and saw Emma, something flickered across her face. Recognition, perhaps, or hope. "Hi, Lily," Emma said softly, rolling closer. "I'm Emma." "You have a chair like me," Lily observed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do. Do you want to see how fast yours can go?" For the first time, Lily smiled. The adoption process moved quickly, partly due to the urgent need for placement, and partly because the social worker could see the immediate connection between Emma and Lily. The little girl had been born with spina bifida, and her previous foster families, while well-meaning, had struggled to meet her specific needs. "She's been waiting for you," the social worker told Emma during one of their meetings. "I've never seen her respond to anyone the way she responds to you." Emma understood. She saw herself in Lily's cautious hope, in the way the little girl tested boundaries to see if she would be accepted or rejected. Emma had been there, had felt that fear of being too much trouble. The day they brought Lily home to the ranch was one of the happiest of Emma's life. The little girl's eyes widened as she took in the vast expanse of land. The horses grazing in the pasture, the mountains reaching toward the sky. "Is this all ours?" she asked in wonder. "It's all ours," Jake confirmed, lifting her from her chair to show her the view from the porch. Lily adapted to ranch life with surprising ease. She delighted in feeding the chickens, helped Emma with the garden, and insisted on helping Jake with the morning chores. Her laughter filled the house with music Emma hadn't known was missing. "She's fearless," Jake observed one evening, watching Lily maneuver her wheelchair around the kitchen while Emma prepared dinner. "She has to be," Emma replied. "The world doesn't make it easy for people like us. But she's got something I didn't have at her age." "What's that?" "People who believe in her from the beginning." The transformation in Lily over the following months was remarkable. The serious, withdrawn child blossomed into a confident, joyful little girl who attacked life with enthusiasm. She started preschool at the local elementary school, where Emma's former colleagues welcomed her with open arms. "She's going to be a force to be reckoned with," the principal told Emma during a parent-teacher conference. "She's got your determination and Jake's steady confidence. That's a powerful combination." Emma's consulting business continued to grow, with Lily often accompanying her to job sites. The little girl had developed an uncanny ability to spot accessibility issues that adults missed, her perspective invaluable in creating truly inclusive spaces. "Mama, the doorway is too narrow for 2 chairs, Lily would announce, and Emma would realize she was right. The space might accommodate 1 wheelchair but not 2 people traveling together. "You're going to put me out of business," Emma would joke, but she was proud of her daughter's keen eye and natural problem-solving abilities. 1 year after Lily's arrival, Emma received a call that would change everything. The State Disability Council had been so impressed with her work that they'd recommended her for a national position. The Americans with Disabilities Act was being updated, and they needed consultants who understood the real-world applications of accessibility law. "It's a dream job," Emma told Jake that evening as they watched Lily play with her dolls on the living room floor. "But it would mean spending time in Washington, possibly relocating." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "What does your heart tell you?" "My heart tells me that I have a chance to make a difference for millions of people like Lily and me. But it also tells me that this ranch, this family, this life we've built, it's everything I've ever wanted." "Then we figure out how to have both," Jake said simply. "We." "Emma, do you really think I'm going to let you tackle Washington without backup?" Jake's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Besides, I've always wanted to see the cherry blossoms." 3 months later, the Morrison family was splitting their time between the ranch and a small apartment in Arlington, Virginia. Jake had hired a ranch manager, a young couple eager to learn the business. And Emma had discovered that her expertise was even more valuable in the nation's capital. "Mama, why don't more buildings have ramps?" Lily asked one day as they navigated the steps of a government building. "Because for a long time people didn't think about making spaces for everyone," Emma explained. "But that's changing. People like you and me are helping to make sure everyone can go everywhere." "Good," Lily said firmly. "Everyone should be able to go everywhere." Emma smiled, recognizing her own determination in her daughter's voice. Lily would grow up in a world where accessibility wasn't an afterthought, but a fundamental consideration. She would never know the shame Emma had felt, the sense of being a burden, You know what, sweetheart? Emma said, lifting Lily into her lap as they waited for the elevator. I think you're going to help change the world. We're going to change it together, Lily corrected, wrapping her arms around Emma's neck. That as the elevator doors opened, Emma felt a surge of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. The accident that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning. The whispers that had once wounded her had been drowned out by the voices of people who saw her worth. She was no longer the woman who had struggled up the church steps, alone and ashamed. She was Emma Morrison, wife, mother, advocate, and force for change. She was exactly who she was meant to be. 5 years had passed since Emma first rolled into Jake's life, and the autumn afternoon found her standing at the podium of the very church where she'd once sat in the back row, invisible and forgotten. But today, she was the keynote speaker for the community's first annual Disability Awareness event. 10 years ago, I sat in the back of this very church, Emma began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed sanctuary. I thought my life was over. I thought I was broken, useless, a burden to everyone around me. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. I was wrong about a lot of things back then, but I was most wrong about what makes a person valuable. I thought it was about what you could do, how fast you could move, how little help you needed. I've learned that real strength isn't about independence, it's about interdependence. It's about building a community where everyone's contributions matter. In the front row, Jake sat with 8-year-old Lily, both beaming with pride. Lily had grown into a confident, articulate child who advocated for herself and others with the same passion her mother brought to her work. She was student council president at her elementary school and had already started a peer mentoring program for children with disabilities. When I first met my husband, Emma continued, he didn't see my wheelchair. He saw my capabilities. He saw potential where others saw limitations. That's the gift we can give each other, the gift of seeing beyond the obvious to the possible. After the presentation, Emma was surrounded by community members sharing their own stories. A young veteran talked about his struggle with PTSD. A mother discussed her autistic son's challenges in school. An elderly man described his fears about aging and losing independence. You've given us hope, the veteran said, shaking Emma's hand. You've shown us that our stories don't have to end with our challenges. They don't, Emma assured him. They're just beginning. Later that evening, the Morrison family sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant oranges and purples. Emma's consulting firm now employed 12 people and had offices in 3 states. Jake's ranch had become a model for sustainable agriculture, and they hosted workshops for other ranchers interested in modernizing their operations. Mama, tell me the story again, Lily requested, settling into Emma's lap. Which story, sweetheart? The story about how you and Daddy met, about how you found each other. Emma smiled, never tiring of this particular tale. Well, once upon a time, there was a woman who thought she was broken. But she wasn't broken, Lily interrupted, as she always did. She was just waiting for her real life to begin, that's right. And then one day, a rancher saw her not as broken, but as exactly what his life was missing. And they lived happily ever after, Lily finished. They did, but not because everything was perfect. They lived happily ever after because they chose to see possibilities instead of problems. Because they built something beautiful together. Jake reached over and took Emma's hand. Any regrets? He asked quietly. Emma considered the question seriously. 10 years ago, she would have given anything to undo the accident, to have her old life back. Now, she couldn't imagine a different path. None, she said finally. Every struggle, every moment of doubt, every door that closed, it all led me here. To you, to Lily, to this work that matters. I wouldn't change a thing. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. Emma's sister had become a regular visitor, often bringing her new boyfriend, a kind man who worked with special needs children. The family had healed completely, stronger for having been tested. Aunt Sarah, Lily called out, maneuvering her wheelchair down the ramp with practiced ease. There's my favorite niece, Sarah replied, scooping Lily into a hug. How was the speech today? Mama was amazing, Lily said proudly. She made people cry happy tears. She has a gift for that, Sarah said, looking at Emma with eyes full of love and respect. That night, after Lily was tucked into bed and Sarah had driven home, Emma and Jake sat in their bedroom, reading before sleep. Emma's latest project was a book about universal design principles, while Jake was absorbed in a biography of Theodore Roosevelt. I got a call today, Jake said, setting down his book. From the state agricultural department. They want to feature our ranch in their sustainable farming initiative. That's wonderful, Emma said, though she noticed something in his tone. But they want to focus on the accessibility modifications. Make it about inspiration rather than innovation. Emma sighed. Even now, after all her success, people sometimes wanted to reduce her story to inspiration porn rather than recognizing her actual achievements. What did you tell them? I told them they could feature the ranch, but only if they focused on the business model and environmental practices. I said if they wanted inspiration, they should look at the woman who turned a failing ranch into a profitable operation while building a multi-state business. Emma's heart swelled with love for this man who had always seen her clearly. Thank you for what? For seeing me, for believing in me, for giving me a chance to become who I was meant to be. Jake set aside his book and pulled her close. You gave me the same gift, you know. Before you came, I was just going through the motions. You brought this place back to life. We brought each other back to life, Emma corrected. Outside their window, the ranch stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the sound was answered by another across the valley. It was the sound of connection, of finding your place in the world. Emma thought about the woman she'd been, sitting alone in the back of the church, and the woman she'd become. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every struggle. She'd learned that strength wasn't about standing on your own, it was about knowing when to ask for help and when to offer it. She'd learned that love wasn't about finding someone who completed you, it was about finding someone who inspired you to complete yourself. Most importantly, she'd learned that the whispers of the world didn't define her worth. They called her a burden, but Jake called her his greatest blessing. Lily called her mama. Her clients called her a lifesaver. Her community called her a leader. And Emma Morrison called herself exactly what she was. A woman who had turned her greatest challenge into her greatest strength. Who had built a life of purpose and meaning from the ashes of her old dreams. The broken road had led her home at last, to a love that saw her completely, a family that cherished her, and a calling that changed lives. She was no longer the woman who had struggled up the church steps alone. She was the woman who had learned to fly. In the end. That made all the difference. They called her a burden, but love called her home. Sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most broken moments, and sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the deepest challenges. Emma Morrison's journey, from despair to triumph, reminds us that our worth isn't measured by our limitations, but by our capacity to love, to grow, and to lift others as we rise. In a world that often sees only what we lack, true love sees all that we are and all that we can become.